Hello, my name is Katie Webb. I am a paranormal investigator, experiencer, witch, all sorts of things on the internet, tarot reader. I teach tarot classes. I was on the Webb series Haunt Me for six seasons. And you know, I am out here. I've been on the Bigfoot Collectors Club podcast and other things that you can find in my link tree. Today we're going to talk about unlocking your inner alchemist, essentially, and creating relationships with like ghosts and cryptids at home. So I'm not here to discount like ghost hunting. I am here to provide alternatives for people that live far away from some of the more like famous places that let you investigate, far away from conventions, or just like anybody that wants. I mean, you can be a regular ghost hunter and still do these things. You can have experiences and relationships in your own home. So let's get into it. I actually wrote down my presentation because I have so much I want to cover. So normally I would just kind of whoop at you, but I have a lot of sources that I'm citing today. So we're going to be really professional. So when we think of supernatural phenomena like ghosts and cryptids and all those things, we think of very specific things. I am under the impression that things are a little bit different than we categorize. So I'm going to use the word ghosts a lot. You can feel free to include, I don't know what that's doing. You can feel free to include your own idea of like cryptids and aliens, just like under that term. I'm going to use the term ghost as like an umbrella term. So I'm not talking about people that are here that we're seeing and potentially talking with through EVPs and things like that. I'm just talking about like a supernatural phenomena that is giving us some type of intelligence, and it is giving us some type of experience. But I feel like that's usually what I do. I like the term ghost. I don't necessarily think it refers to like a person or whatever. Okay. Okay. Let's see here. So when we talk about like ghosts and things like that, a lot of us are out here trying to collect evidence that these things exist, right? Like that is the goal of a lot of paranormal television. And that is the goal of going to specific locations that we like know are haunted, right? Like we are hoping to have a specific experience that we have cataloged in our mind that is validation for our beliefs, right? Let's get into the word belief a little bit, because people's beliefs have become wild and they are now making our laws. They're now doing all kinds of wild things. But let's talk about more fun beliefs like paranormal stuff. Beliefs that don't hurt other people. Let's see. So what is belief? What even is it? The dictionary says that it is something someone accepts as true. As simple as that. No one needs to believe what you believe, and no one needs to believe your experiences in order for them to be true for you. Ghosts are so rarely physical manifestations that our belief is instrumental. And depending on what level of that you have, kind of what I was saying, mine is a little bit different than maybe some of yours, and that's literally fine. We can still vibe and we can still have a good time. But like, you know, our belief is instrumental. And I just want to bring out this book here really quick. This is a book called When Prophecies Fail. So these are all different ideas that have, and religions that have essentially failed. And it talks about how people move on from that. If they move on from that, all of those types of things. So like, I reference this all of the time because to me, this was really important. So there was this flat earth documentary on Netflix, and it was all about proving that the earth is round to flat earthers. So they went and they found a group of flat earthers who hang out and believe the earth is flat, and they are buds, and they are just having like the best time together, right? So the documentary and this group undergoes this experiment believing that it's going to prove that the earth is flat. And of course, it proves that the earth is round, because of course. But however, the end of that documentary, they're talking about, what are you going to do now that you know that the earth is round? And they all say they're just going to continue to believe it's flat, because being in this group was the best camaraderie they have seen in a long time. And so it's less about belief and more about friendship for them, you know what I mean? And friendship under a common, like, weird thing that they all thought at one point in time. And we have that too, right? Like, you see all of us like meeting at conventions and being able to hang out, because us like weirdos are spread out across the country who believe in ghosts and who are actively searching and trying to understand and have relationships with them, and, you know, experimenting with these other realms and energies and things like that. Like, we are pretty weird for that in our society. And so it's nice to get together and do these things. So all of that is to say, like, please keep doing these things, but that belief in those ghosts does not have to just be a social thing. Like, it can happen for you at home. And so let's continue. I went on to talk about ways people try to test their beliefs. Let's talk about some of the ghost systems in place to validate our energies really quick, you know? One of them is like a K2 meter. We don't have a lot of actual science that says that K2 meters are definitely detecting spirits. And in my experience, a lot of spirits that I vibe with in a haunted space don't actually show up on K2s. Sometimes they do, but not all the time. So I feel like, you know, those aren't always reliable, but it is fun to see them light up. I use them too. There's my cute little K2 meter. Let's see. In my personal experience, I wrote a K2 only lights up 2 out of 5 ghosts. Yeah, that's pretty accurate, I'd say, that I wrote that down. So other ways that we test our belief is with the Estes method or Ouija boards. Both of these methods work, but they both do another thing as well, which is really interesting and can play a really instrumental role in our interactions with spirits, in our home and in our personal growth. So, I wrote, our unconscious mind will shine forward in the Estes method if the people on the other end give over control to the person that is under. So what I mean by that, I was fortunate enough to be trained by Carl and Connor on how to do the Estes method. There's actually an episode on Haunt Me where they teach us how to do this. Roll the clip.
Maybe learn how to do the Estes method in me and Carol's area, where we get a blip.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
So we want to try the traditional Estes method first, just to make sure that basically there's spirits here who are willing to talk through the method before we start to amplify it.
Carl's going to be listening to the feed. What I recommend to people when they're listening is that they sort of try to report everything they hear. Yep. Even if it's small, little noises, everything. He essentially needs to enter into a state of relaxation.
We'll have somebody playing a spirit box. They're going to have soundproof headphones on. They're going to be wearing a blindfold. They can't see anything in the room. They can't hear anything else in the room. They're purely focused on that feed and basically being a megaphone for the spirits as they allow their voices to come through.
All right, so Carl is listening to a device right now that essentially enables him to potentially hear your voice. He cannot hear us right now, but I think you might be able to talk to him. I'm talking to any spirits that are here right now, anybody that we can't see right now. We're not ignoring you. We'd really enjoy hearing from you, but we want to make it
killer body.
We want to make it very clear that it is you coming through. So no matter who I'm speaking with, could one spirit please step forward and make the next word out of Carl's mouth?
What?
Could somebody please make the next word out of Carl's mouth?
Carl.
Food. some type of food.
What time of year does the mill look the most beautiful?
Damn it. I can tell.
Wonder if
You
they're not talking to us.
in love?
There's like they're talking
Road?
to each other.
We just stepped into a soap opera.
Wouldn't be the first time.
It's interesting because when you're doing the Estes method, if they're talking to each other,
Sam? I'm not sure on that one.
Sweet.
Thanks.
this just turned green, double green.
Can you move it around a little bit?
So you can see it?
No, I just kind of, just to, I don't know.
Like up and
Yeah,
stuff,
just to like get a feel for.
So I think that is like a really great showcase of how fast you can lose track of the Estes method when you're supposed to be listening for food, right? Because you are so hopeful of that evidence that you are throwing out like the science part of it. But that isn't to say that that is wrong, but it's also like if you are using this to get evidence, it is really important to stick to those guns and wait for that food and continue on watching the episode because we do. It's really important to notice that they talk about you as the questioner are leading the conversation. So the person under is the person, when I say under, I mean the person blindfolded and with the headphones on and listening to the spirit box. That person is saying everything that they think could potentially be a word. So what they're saying isn't always important. They are just the conduit, right? So when you are on the other end and you are asking the questions, you do things to try to validate the fact that that spirit is in the room with you, right? You try to ask like, what am I wearing? Do I have a hat on? Those kinds of questions. And sometimes the person under will start to pick up things like, I was traumatized here. And they'll start saying different full sentences like that do not answer your question. But that could potentially be a spirit in the room. And so in this moment, it's a little hard to know what to do because you do not necessarily want to stifle that person's potential connection to that spirit. However, if that spirit is in the room and is a conscious spirit that we are trying to interact with, it is important to go back and be like, that is a really interesting thing. I would like to get back to that, but I just want to know that we are in the same room together. Can you tell me what I'm wearing, And they may not give you a straightforward answer if the word clothing comes up or red and you're wearing red. I mean, I would accept some of those things. They're not always going to be a straightforward answer. However, very often when someone is under in the Estes method and is just going and going and going and going, they are saying a lot of what's actually in their subconscious. They are mining their subconscious. And it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the paranormal investigation. That is not to say it's not interesting. That is not to say it's not interesting, but it is not a spirit in the room. So we have to kind of check ourselves with these things, right? We have to, at this point, kind of understand who we are, what we are going through, and how that is coming forward. Ouija boards are the same thing. So Ouija boards, our unconscious mind can sometimes move the planchette, right? Or the cup, whatever you're using. And it's really important in these instances to note that that could potentially be happening. So there's an instance in Haunt Me where we were using a Ouija board together and the letters UTI is what we got. And sure, that happens to be something you get, when you wear a wet bathing suit for too long or something like that. But however, it's a little garbagey. It's a little hot nonsense. You know what I mean? And so to me, in those moments, it is highly likely and very potential that more than one of our subconscious minds were moving that planchette, and we got hot garbage. And with that being said, I would actually like to read an excerpt from the book Experimental Magic. At the start of the seance, each one present sits in a circle round the table and places one finger of either hand lightly on the bottom of the glass, preferably at the edge. They're obviously using a cup. After that, the only further ingredient needed is patience. On our first attempt, it took 20 minutes before the glass began to move, but move it did. Joanna, who was too accustomed to these things to feel embarrassment, asked the traditional question, "Is anybody there?" The glass shuddered slightly, then, with growing speed, began to circle the letters. Eventually, it returned to the center and waited. We asked our questions, many of them asinine to a degree, and the glass spelt it out afterwards. Answers. Afterward, Joanna confessed she never felt entirely happy about the glass moving. Such physical phenomena tended to block out the spiritual truths of her religion. Since that evening, I have used this crude form of Ouija more times than I can count. Today, I don't feel entirely happy about it either, although for different reasons from those which troubled Joanna. The first question to be asked is why the glass moves. And the first answer is the obvious one, because it is pushed. Obvious or not, the objection is virtually impossible to overcome. A joker, providing he acts with subtlety, simply cannot be detected. The only real safeguard is to know your friends and to make sure they are willing to gauge in the experiment without prejudice. Assuming any conscious fraud is absent, the possibility of unconscious influence arises. For years, I was convinced this must be the explanation. I was then reluctant to accept the possibility of spirit intervention. But a psychiatrist disabused me. How many people attend these seances? 5 or 6, I say. Then you would have 5 or 6 unconscious minds influencing the direction of the glass. The result would be garble. But it wasn't garble, was it? It was not. So they go on to explain many different Ouija sessions, what worked, what didn't work. This is a very interesting book, especially if you are struggling with belief. Okay, so sometimes our need for proof can cloud our experiences, especially like our genuine, authentic relationships with other realms and things like that. So I'm gonna tell you a story. Okay, so I wrote, my aunt always says that our grandfather, her dad, shows up in the form of a red robin. And obviously, like, that could be for her, whatever. I always thought that was really sweet. And one day I am listening to a What's Up Weirdo. If you have not listened to that podcast, it's really wonderful, especially if you're interested in horror movies and paranormal content. It is with Jessica Napick and John Tenney. What's Up Weirdo does EVP episodes, and for their form of like a cheeky, cute EVP, people send in stories. They call their hotline and send in stories. And so this one woman was talking about a similar situation where a spirit in her life shows up as this. And I got thinking about my grandfather and how my aunt says that he shows up as a red robin. And the What's Up Weirdo moment, it cuts to Jessica talking about a similar situation for her. And in that moment, when she's talking about how she has like a similar thing, and I'm thinking about my grandfather, I'm driving down the road and a red robin flies in front of my car. And like, wow, heard. You know what I mean? To me, that was validation. Like, maybe my grandfather does show up as a red robin. And what do you take from that? For me, I take from that I am being watched over, that my family is with me, that my ancestors care, even beyond that I have a spiritual guide. Another interesting moment, Jessica and I were at the Conjuring House together, and we were there during the day, and we were there for a short period of time, so we didn't get to experience a lot of the ghosts that are in the Conjuring House. However, the real Conjuring House. It's not the house that they filmed the movie in. I say the Conjuring house because you know the story the minute I say the name of the movie, but the real farmhouse is where we were, and we were up in the top floor. We were with a guide, and he was kind of telling us what was going on, and he was talking about a battle that happened on the yard and how people see soldiers out there. And so I look out there, and who is out there sitting in the yard is a little red robin. You know, and that is for nobody but me. So I think sometimes instances that don't seem supernatural, like the red robin showing up in different times, like at paranormal locations, when, you know, it's being talked about or when I'm thinking about it, those to me are paranormal experiences because they go beyond our reality. It is potentially an unexplainable energy showing itself to us in a physical form that we can see, right? So I think sometimes like this need for validation, especially in the forms that we're taught via paranormal shows like K2 and spirit boxes and things like that, takes away from what having paranormal experiences does for us as human beings who are actually made of stardust and who are actual magic. We aren't just workers meant to make money, you know what I mean? We're very like special. And so one of the principles, the deepest principles in magic is to know thyself. And while that goes very deep in very many facets, it is also really important to know and appreciate all the things that are happening to you. Let's see. For me, ghost hunting, being a witch, practicing magic is just that. I have learned things about myself that I never would have by engaging in esoteric practices. This is true. So I believe that cryptids are a type of ghost, that Bigfoot is a type of fairy. I believe there is a type of Bigfoot that is a full-blown UFO flying alien. It hurts you none for me to believe these things. It hurts me none to believe these things, which is something John Tenney says a lot. So if you've never seen one of his speeches, it will open your mind and it will validate all of the little things that you were hoping were paranormal. But I get to live my little magical life and having my little magical fun. And so I just hope that for everybody, you know what I mean? With that being said, if you are interested in thinking more about Bigfoot as a fairy, I implore you to listen to my Bigfoot Collectors Club podcast because we talk about some of the stories that I have experienced that kind of made me feel that way. Also, Josh Cutchin and Timothy Renner write these books, Where the Footprints End, and it is a lot of folklore on different types of Bigfoot. So if you feel like, you know, these are things that you are interested in and you haven't read these books yet, I definitely would read those books. I would also pick up a book by Gordon White. I don't own this book, but it is all about UFO flying Bigfoot. And in this moment, I'm going to quickly tell you another story that I have never told on any podcast or anything like that because it involves a deep amount of belief. I went on a paranormal road trip with the Haunt Me crew. We met up with Greg and Dana Newkirk in Pennsylvania, and they took us to Barclay Cemetery, which is where I had my very first Bigfoot Fae experience. Dana and I were kind of like fairy led into the woods, and we ended up finding like a Bigfoot creature. So that was my first instinct of like feeling like Bigfoot was very like Fae. And then after we went to Barclay, we went to Hinsdale House and we had really wild experiences there. And then we went home. And the next day I did not have to work, and it was a Wednesday, and every Wednesday I went to a public meditation. And so I get to this public meditation and I travel. I go through what looked like a visual like wormhole. Like it was like purple. And I end up on this planet and all I could think of was Super Mario Brothers 2, old NES. I'm 41. We're going old. We're going way back. And when you go to that giant world and all of the things are really big, that's what it was like. I was on this planet where trees were really big, like leaves were like the size of me. And these creatures were walking beside me and they were fully hairy and they were huge. And I felt like I was on a Bigfoot planet. And so I've never gone back. I went there in a meditation. I've never visited again. I didn't speak to anybody. I don't have any like cool info to say about it. However, it kind of, for me, validates a few different things. One of the things when I was asking Bigfoot questions, I was asking if, you know, they'd been to like Andromeda and the Pleiades and different star clusters and different outer space places, and they were all saying yes. And then Gordon White has that whole book about Bigfoot being a space pilot. And then this other time I was in Kentucky and my friend Lisa Dickens and I saw Bigfoot in a white suit. He looked like he was in a spacesuit. And I talk about that on the Bigfoot Collectors Pod in more detail. But, you know, you don't have to believe that at all. You can be like, this girl is wild. This girl is crazy. and again, it like doesn't matter because it doesn't hurt anybody to do these things. You know what I mean? So I just like, I'm gonna stop saying that over and over and over again, but I'm really hoping that it like sinks in that having ghost experiences is a lot lighter and a lot less serious than some people make it out to be. And you don't have to be so worried about doing things wrong and believing the wrong thing. If you aren't hurting other people, then go about your business. If you are not hurting yourself, go about your business. Okay, so let's continue on. Now, I know ghost hunting isn't always an accessible option for people, so let's get into how you can have this whimsical, fun life at home. Okay. Talking about my Bigfoot fairy story. Okay, let's talk about your space. Okay, so one of the very first things I do in any space that I move into is I set up an altar. And that's what I do at the very first thing when I ghost hunt as well. I set up an altar. To set up an altar, I think about my intentions. So with paranormal investigation, my intentions are always communication, safety, you know, happiness, peace, all of those wonderful vibes that make somebody want to kind of hang out with you. You know what I mean? That make you kind of fun and happy and exciting. So I do a lot of crystals. I'll do a lot of like, this is pink calcite. You can do like rose quartz. You can use just like regular quartz. I like a good like amethyst to kind of like connect in like a dream world. This is like a chevron amethyst. And I'll throw like some smoky quartz around on there, you know. It can't hurt to just like keep a protective vibe, but I'll do some labradorite, different things that like will like, and you know, help me get into an ethereal state of mind. And if I am in a space that allows incense, I will create an incense, you know, mashup as well. So anyway, let's go look at my altar. So I don't always like to show my altar because it's very personal, but this is for you guys, just to give you some like ideas, potentially, whatever, you know what I mean? So it's on top of a dresser. The mirror is really important for magic. You need to see yourself and your like magic needs to be projected outwards. So I have pictures of my Nana, my kid. So I have two altars going on here right now. I have a working altar, which is where I do magic spells. And then back here is where I have my ancestor altar. It looks like they need more water, my bad. And then this is my altar to Naga Kanya. She also needs water. Wow, I'm doing a really bad job. This was one of those stones, the agates I was talking about that looked like a dragon's egg that I used to have on my dragon. But see, I have like sigils and money and my athame, which is a switchblade. This is a spray bottle of Florida water, but I keep it on my altar to keep it charged. I have sigils underneath it. This is my grandfather that shows up as the red robin that I was talking about. And then I have different things. So this is from one of my friends, Jana, from her yard. She brought to me, bringing in some friendship into my altar. These are the Paris catacombs given to me by Ryan and Amy from Full Dark Paranormal, if you know about them. I keep a giant chunk of fluorite. But this is a working spell I have going, and it's none of your business what that's about. But for more friendship, I keep my John Tenney candle that I've burned on here. Even though I've burned through it, I still keep it because he made it. This is some Four Thieves potion that I made for protection, and so I keep that here. And yeah, you can see all of my crystals and my current spell that's going. Now, if you don't have the capacity to have an altar at your house, say you live with people that really wouldn't appreciate that, you can do something cute like this. This is a little portable altar that Bex made me from when she was in Liminal Earth. And there's all these, it came with these tiny little jars of red cedar and St. John's wort. It had mugwort. Mugwort is also really great for spirit communication. If you are in a space where you cannot burn these, you can keep them together. If you were in a moment, like let's say you're in your car or you're in the woods or somewhere and you've got your little altar and it's got some crystals in it and it's got your little stuff, I would uncap. And then I would try to talk to whoever I'm trying to talk to, whether it's your ancestors or another spirit you'd like to bring in. I actually have graveyard dirt that I keep at my home from a haunted graveyard that I just like fell in love with in my old neighborhood, so that I always have it with me, and I would put that in my little altar if I needed to take it with me. So a portable altar can be really wonderful depending on the space that you have. And then another thing, before I would have that seance or before I would have that moment where I am talking physically to another being, I would give an offering. So every day I tend to my different altars. They don't all need an offering every single day. I would say about once a week I give them all water, all glass of water. You know, you got to stay hydrated even when you're a spirit. And I have usually like a little dish where I'll put coffee, or if I know a spirit would prefer something else. There was a minute there where I was conversing with lots of like spirit dogs, and so I would leave like dog food on my altar. It depends what spirits I'm communicating with, but those are like the weekly, like regular offerings I leave. But if I'm doing a seance and I want someone to come talk to me right now, I use apples. Apples are the fruit of the dead. Google it. It is a thing. Apples have a connection to other worlds, and so slicing open an apple and giving that as an offering is a really wonderful, gesture, and a really easy offering to bury. It doesn't often upset the natural surroundings, and it's best to bury your offerings after. So we got to think in terms of like sustainability and the creatures outside, like the squirrels and such like that might eat it, So, and refreshing your offerings on the regular. Now let's talk about your vibe. Let's talk about things you can do to trust yourself more, or ways you can have more experiences within. For me, Reiki is huge. However, the person you get Reiki from is really important. So currently, I do not have a trustworthy person to do Reiki on me in physical form. There's plenty of friends in our weirdo community that can do it via the internet, but one-on-one is next level and the best. I can't even tell you how much Reiki opened me up to other realms, to other experiences, to being better at meditation. Meditation is instrumental, these types of things. Now, meditation and Reiki are not for everybody. Let's keep talking. Here's what I wrote. Let me read what I wrote. Skeptics have plenty of experiences, but fun, happy people have way more. That isn't to say if you have depression, you won't have paranormal experiences. Even Thor's hammer came back to him when he was depressed. It's true. I don't mean you can't be chemically imbalanced. I mean, you can't have hate in your heart. When I say fun, happy people. Raising your vibe to your favorite song, wearing your favorite outfit, carrying your favorite trinkets are always good choices to raise your vibe. The things that make you feel best about yourself make you feel best to ghosts and other things, like undoubtedly. I'm a DJ also, and I love it. It raises my vibe so much to mix songs together. It's like my favorite thing, and I can do it on my iPad. So on the way to investigations, I used to DJ because that really helped me out. If you saw my talk for Boo Fest, we do a seance, and before we do a seance, we dance to Hot to Go because hello, everybody loves that song. That song is amazing. If you are not on the Chapel Roan train, it is time to get on it, baby, because that song is going to raise your vibe, especially if you do the little dance, you know. HOTTOGO. So having an altar where you put your ancestors' pictures on it, or where I used to connect with, this is going to be a little really next level silly if we haven't gotten there already. But I used to connect with like dragon energy, and I know that that's like made up in a sense, you know what I mean? But that was always a thing that I just like loved. And so on my dragon's altar, I would do the graveyard dirt from a cemetery. I would do ambers and carnelians and very like red stones, and I would do like lots of like hematite, like the bubbly looking like hematite that looks like it could be like dragon scales and dragon skin. And I would do like agates that were like shaped like eggs that looked like dragon's eggs. Like I haven't set it up in my new house, but at one point I had this altar that was for like dragon energy, to embrace that, to like be the go-getter, you know, that I like want to be. And it's like those types of things that really like bring on all of these paranormal investigations. It is the regularity, it is the trying, it is the putting yourself out there, and then it is the understanding that not just a K2 blip is a paranormal experience, right? So for some people, and for witches back in the day, they used to use different substances to kind of get them like in the mood to kind of like be a part of another realm. Witches back in the day used flying ointments a lot. Let me see here. I have a quote. Did I not save the page? Wait, I picked up the wrong book. Okay. Typically, witch drugs of the early medieval period contained substances like datura, henbane, and mandrake. Substances so potent that the safest way to take them was topically, as they could easily prove fatal if ingested too strong. Let's see. Okay, so these different plants were reputed to have been used by witches to induce visions, sensations of flyings in rituals. So you can get flying ointments nowadays, and they are made with the same thing, and you do put them on topically. So you would put them behind your ears, on your wrists, at the balls of your feet, where the membrane on your skin is thinner. If you would like to get into this type of thing, I highly recommend getting into Daniel Schulke. This is a book that he's written. He is the Poisoner's Apothecary. The Poisoner's Apothecary is where I got my flying ointments. For me, I don't know if it's all the Reiki or if it just comes naturally, but I feel like I'm already kind of out there. The flying ointments made me feel nauseous. So heads up. But, you know, that is something that witches used to do. That is something that you can try. Witches are still making flying ointments. Again, the Poisoner's Apothecary is where I got mine. They know so much about poisons, and they are a cool queer witch, so highly recommend. You can get into other books to teach yourself about different poisons, and at that point I would also want you to just like know a little bit about cannabis. Cannabis was often used to quell that nausea. That's what helped me out as well. Like a cannabis tincture is nice. You can even put the topical back on. If you don't want any THC involved, you can just use CBD to help that out as well. Liber 420 is all about how occultists used to use cannabis back in the day. Cannabis was not used to like blend yourself into other worlds. It kind of dulls your senses. So it has you, for me personally, I don't smoke like before I do an investigation or anything like that, because it does actually kind of dull my senses to those kinds of things. And if smoked before bed, a lot of people find they don't dream. So it does kind of like dull us, but in that way, it also adds to a lot of psychic protection, and it adds to a lot of, safety and help. So it will help with the nausea, and it will help with any type of like you're out there too much, unless you know you smoke the kind that gives you anxiety. We can get into that on a whole other thing. I am a really big cannabis advocate, but I do think that it is really important to know when and when not to use. You know what I mean? Now, other people have used different things to open their minds. There's this whole book called How to Change Your Mind. It is all about psychedelics. Psychedelics are a way to fix and open your mind. I have felt stuck before. There have been times where I have felt like I can't bring myself to do my favorite things. I'm not having paranormal experiences and things like that. And I personally have no issues with psilocybin. And so I do something like that. This book is about DMT and psilocybin. If you are interested, we're not going to really get too deep into that, because I know that is absolutely not for everybody. It's absolutely like not super legal. However, if you are open to it and you need to facilitate some type of change in your mind, you may want to talk to somebody in Colorado that knows more. You may want to reach out to me that knows more about psychedelics, because there is a place for them in opening your mind and entering into other worlds. Having a paranormal experience while on substances doesn't necessarily negate what you're experiencing. Getting on the same vibe as a ghost is the whole thing. So let's talk about that a little bit. Our basic level of biology talks about all the vibrating atoms and molecules are doing, right? So when we say like being on the same vibing, but I literally mean like vibing. So like I have been on paranormal investigations with other mediums, and they connect with ghosts that I cannot see, and I connect with ghosts that they cannot see, and sometimes we meet and sometimes we can experience the same thing, but we are on different vibes. And I think that I am not the only paranormal investigator to talk about how we are our own tuning fork, and we are tuned to some other vibrations and dimensions. And when we go on paranormal investigations, that kind of really makes itself known, and we vibe with certain ghosts and whatever who is on the same vibe, right? So that's why I bring in different like crystals and things like that. Look at this honking one, my green calcite, because these have a vibration. When you go to a crystal store and they've got those little cards that are like, it is good for this, that is because that's the vibration that crystal is on, right? So we bring in crystals to help facilitate a new vibration. We bring in food for the same reason, apples and things like that. We are creating a vibe that says, I am here, I am safe, you can talk to me. That is our alchemical charge. Like, we are taking control of the environment, and we are trying to create an atmosphere that allows what other things are on that vibe to talk to us, if that makes sense. Which is why I even bring this up, because these types of things change our vibe entirely. And so if we are struggling and we are at our wits' end and we are just desperate for a change mentality, it is not necessarily a wrong choice. You just have to feel good about it. You know what I mean? I can't make you do, I'm not trying to sell you anything. Okay, I'm not trying to sell you anything. Okay, let's continue on. Let's talk about creating a ritual, because that is us creating the vibe to talk to another being, right? And, you know, it is important to choose the right day, the right time of year. Beltane and Halloween are at those same poles of thinness, if you will, in the veils, thinness. So maybe if you have been struggling with having a paranormal experience, doing your ritual at like Beltane or at Halloween time of year would help you out a little bit. Time of day, we often choose nighttime because it's quiet. If you can't safely be somewhere at night, you don't have to feel like you will not have a paranormal experience. It is just going to take a little bit more like focus and concentration, because there is so much going on. There will be birds, there will be, you know, animals running around, there potentially could be people, cars driving by. Like, the reason we choose night is because it is easier to sync our senses into another dimension, because there isn't a ton going on. I mean, even just the brightness of the sun can take you out, you know what I mean? So that is typically why night is the better time, because our senses, we can kind of let them meld in. Like, I do that because like your aura should melt into the other dimensions around you, if that makes sense. Okay, now we talked about Poisoner's Apothecary. Go check him out. Check out these books. I think I've given you all my reference books. Be careful in abandoned spaces. People could be in there. Hey, housing is expensive as ever, and so there are more people without homes than ever. So be super, super careful if you're going into abandoned spaces to look for ghosts, because people are also at their wits' end. Everything is expensive. People are actively struggling to survive, and that will make people a little more violent than normal, a little more like unhinged. So please be super careful when you're going out. That's another reason why I thought this was so important. So let's talk about doing like a little ritual at your house. I did one for Boo Fest. What I did was I created a space on a kitchen table. I cleared off the kitchen table. I washed it. I gave it a new life. You know what I mean? Then I lined it with candles. I put some blue crystals out there because blue is the throat chakra, and so I kind of like to use blue for communication, but I also like to use purple for crown to kind of like get kind of out there. I had graveyard dirt, I had candles I had made for communication, and we raised our vibe by dancing first, and then we pulled some tarot cards. If you have watched Haunt Me, if you watched my talk at Boo Fest, if you follow me on social media, I share different like experience I've had where spirits will touch the tarot cards themselves. And so I like to lay them out at first just in case that wants to happen. And then if a few minutes go by and that doesn't happen, I try to feel like maybe what tarot cards want to be pulled, and I pull and we start talking. That is a really great way to do it. You can use a Ouija board. You can do the Estes method if you're with other people. You can do the Estes method if you're by yourself. You can just put on the gear and record yourself with your phone, you know, right then and there, and just see what happens. So there are all sorts of ways that you can try to have paranormal experiences in your home, and that is not less valid than going to a haunted place. It's just as valid. It doesn't matter if people don't believe you. It is all about you. Your paranormal experiences help you grow as a person, and you're supposed to take away certain things from these experiences. I promise you that. I promise you that. Let's see. So here, I was talking about different vibes. It's all about accepting your vibe or changing it. I've said this before, and I'll say it a million times. If you saw my talk at PhenomenaCon, this was what it was all about. Or if you went and saw me on Coffee and Cauldrons, where I was teaching you how to read tarot cards for ghosts, it is all about knowing that you are the magic. It is you. Would ghosts even exist if it weren't for humans? I'm gonna leave you with that question. And with the notion that you, baby, you are the magic. I'm not more special than you. You can do it too. You just have to find the ways that work for you. So I hope I've given you like some new insights, some new ideas, some new experiments that you want to try. If I didn't answer a question that you had, you can find me on social media. I would love to answer your questions. I am not on socials very much, so please don't be offended if it even goes like a month without hearing from me. Like literally, I post stuff, but I don't scroll. But I would love to hear your questions. I would love to hear your stories. And join my Patreon. We do all kinds of fun stuff together, and we do a lot of self-help stuff too. We work through self-help booklets because sometimes you have to remove your blockages to feel your power. So feel your power, treat yourself right, eat good food, get as much exercise as you are willing to get, and drink all kinds of water, and go howl at the full moon.